In the heart of ancient African villages, where storytelling fires flickered under a starlit sky, there lived tales as vibrant as the land itself. This tale tells of the first time villagers saw a masquerade. The origin of masquerade is more than a story, it is an adventure to save lives.
Once upon a time, in a small Igbo village called Umuofia, the people were in trouble. One by one, they began to feel very weak, their heads spinning and their bodies aching. No one could explain what was wrong, and the sickness spread quickly. Elders, young men, women, and even little children felt a strange illness. The village doctor tried all his herbs, but nothing seemed to work. One evening, a brave young man named Emeka gathered his friends under a large mango tree. Emeka was smart and loved by the people. He couldn't bear to see his family and friends suffer like this. "I have to do something," he said to his friends. "We can't just watch as everyone falls ill." "What can we do?" asked his friend Namdi, scratching his head. "Even the doctor has tried everything, and nothing has worked." Emeka thought hard, then remembered his grandmother, who lived in a village far away. She was known to be wise, with many secrets and stories passed down from her ancestors. Emeka decided to go and ask for her advice. The next morning, he set off on the long journey to his grandmother's village. It was a rough path, but Emeka didn't mind. He was determined to help his people. After hours of walking, he reached his grandmother's hut.
"Grandma, the people in our village are sick and we don't know why. I came here because I need your wisdom. I cannot continue to watch them suffer the pains. I need your help, Grandma."
His grandmother, who was old and wrinkled like the bark of an ancient tree, listened quietly. Then she closed her eyes and thought deeply. After a while, she opened them and smiled a little. "Emeka," she said softly, "sometimes sickness comes from the mind as much as from the body."
"What do you mean, Grandma? I am confused."
"Fear can make a person feel sick," she explained. "If your people focus too much on the illness, it will grow stronger in their minds, and their bodies will follow. But how can we stop them from thinking about it?" Emeka wondered aloud. A twinkle appeared in his grandmother's eye. "There is a way," she said. "You and some young men must dress in a way that no one will recognize you. Cover your faces and scare them, make them run. When they are focused on running, they will forget their fear of the sickness." Emeka's eyes lit up as he listened. "But how will we do this?" "You must become masquerades. Cover yourselves and chase them through the village, into the bushes and forests. Speak in a strange language so they won't recognize you. Do it until they forget their fear." Emeka thought it was a brilliant idea. He thanked his grandmother and quickly returned to Umuofia. He shared the plan with his friends, and they agreed to help. The young men gathered materials, old cloths, dried palm leaves, and paint to make their faces look strange and scary. The next night, as the village lay silent, Emeka and his friends dressed as masquerades, covering their faces completely. They practiced speaking in a strange language, made up of sounds they had created just for this. They hid in the bushes and waited for the perfect moment. Suddenly, they burst out from the shadows, shouting and waving sticks. The villagers were startled. They had never seen anything like this before. The villagers screamed in fear and scattered in all directions. They ran towards the bushes, some hiding behind trees and others diving into small streams. Children clung to their mothers, and even the strongest men of the village felt their hearts race with fear. The strange figures didn't stop. They chased and shouted, their language a confusing mix of sounds no one could understand. Emeka and his friends moved swiftly, staying hidden in the shadows. They made sure to keep their faces covered and never allowed anyone to get too close. Each time someone tried to approach, they would let out a loud, eerie noise that sent shivers down everyone's spine. The villagers called out to one another, trying to make sense of what was happening, but the masquerades kept coming. After what felt like hours, the villagers finally managed to slip away, hiding quietly in their homes or sleeping huts. The strange figures slowly disappeared into the forest, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. For the first time that night, the villagers gathered around their huts, talking excitedly about the mystery beings. They didn't speak of sickness or aches, they only spoke of the strange visitors and their thrilling experience. As the days passed, Emeka and his friends would appear every other night, never letting the villagers predict their arrival. Sometimes they would come when everyone was asleep, and sometimes just as the sun was setting. Each time, the villagers would scream, run, and laugh as they escaped. They started looking forward to the chase, and each person told their own tales about what they saw and heard. One night, Emeka and his friends decided to add drums and bells to make their appearance even more exciting. They tied bells around their ankles and beat on small drums as they ran through the village. The loud sounds echoed across the village, and people jumped out of their beds to watch and run. It felt like a festival, and the excitement grew each time the masquerades appeared. The villagers no longer talked about sickness. Instead, they looked out for the next time the masquerades would come. They forgot their fears and aches, too busy laughing, running, and hiding from the strange visitors. And, as the days passed, something wonderful happened. People started to feel better. The sickness that had once troubled them seemed to fade away, and their strength returned. One evening, while sitting under a tree, Emeka gathered his friends to talk about what they had achieved. "Look at our people," Emeka said with pride. "They are happy, and the sickness is gone. We did it." His friends nodded, feeling proud. But Emeka reminded them, "Remember, we must not reveal ourselves. Not yet. Let's keep this going a little longer. We want the village to fully heal." They agreed and decided to keep the masquerade appearances a mystery. Each night, they would plan different ways to make their appearance thrilling, sometimes even leaving strange symbols on the ground or hanging leaves in the trees as signs. The villagers continued to live in wonder, sharing stories of the masquerades, laughing at how they ran each night, and feeling a new strength in their hearts. Emeka knew that their plan had worked, but he also felt something deeper was happening. The village was coming together, becoming closer, and facing life with courage again. Emeka was careful to lead the masquerades only for as long as he felt was needed. As the people became stronger and more hopeful, Emeka's heart was filled with joy. But he kept his promise to his friends. They would keep the secret until they were sure the village was healed, united, and free from fear. And so, each night, the village of Umofia would fall silent, waiting for the mysterious figures to arrive, not with fear but with excitement, wondering what the masquerades would bring. As days turned into weeks, Emeka and his friends continued their masquerade appearances, always careful not to reveal their identities. But unknown to Emeka, 3 of his friends, Nnamdi, Obinna, and Chuka, had begun discussing a different plan. They had noticed how much the villagers feared the masquerades and realized they could use that fear to their advantage. One evening, as the group rested after a night of chasing and drumming, Nnamdi whispered to Obinna and Chuka, "Why don't we use the masquerade to take a few things from the people? They won't know it's us, and they'll be too scared to complain." Obinna hesitated, but Chuka's eyes lit up with interest. "What if they try to stop us?" Nnamdi grinned. "They won't. We are the masquerades. They are too afraid to come near us. We could take anything we want, and they would just think it's the spirits taking what they're owed." The 3 friends agreed to try it the next day. Without telling Emeka, they sneaked out early in the morning and dressed in their masquerade outfits. They covered their faces, put on the bells, and made strange noises as they roamed the village. But this time, instead of scaring the villagers and leaving, they walked toward the market square, where people kept their baskets of yams, cassava, and other farm produce. A woman named Adebi was tending to her yams when she heard the sounds of the masquerades approaching. She looked up and saw the figures in their strange costumes coming closer. She immediately felt nervous, so she quickly gathered her things, but one of the masquerades, the one who was Nnamdi, stood in her way. "Leave these yams here," he commanded in the strange language Emeka had invented. Adebi's heart raced. She didn't want any trouble, so she left her basket of yams and backed away slowly. As she walked off, she looked over her shoulder and saw the masquerades taking her basket, disappearing into the forest. She was too afraid to say anything but rushed back to her hut to tell her family. The next day, stories spread around the village. Several villagers had seen the masquerades in broad daylight, taking yams, cassava, and even some pots and pans from the market square. People whispered that the masquerades had grown powerful and that they were angry, demanding offerings to be left for them. When Emeka heard the news, he was puzzled. He hadn't planned any daytime appearances, and he hadn't discussed anything about taking food or goods from the villagers. Emeka pulled his friends together that night to talk about it. "Did any of you go to the market today as masquerades?" he asked, looking at each of them carefully. Nnamdi, Obinna, and Chuka exchanged glances but shook their heads, hiding their guilt. "No, we didn't," Nnamdi said, keeping his voice steady. "Who could it be?" Emeka was unsure but decided to trust his friends. He told them, "We must continue helping the village, but remember, we are not here to take anything. We are here to heal and unite our people." Namdi, Obina, and Chuka nodded, but their minds were already filled with plans. The next morning, they decided to try something bolder. They dressed as masquerades again and headed to the farms, where villagers were busy harvesting their crops. They moved quickly, taking baskets of yams, bundles of cassava, and even bags of maize. When the farmers saw them, they froze, unsure of what to do. One old farmer named Okeke spoke up, "Why are you taking our crops? We have little as it is." Namdi, still in disguise, waved a stick in the air. "Silence. We are the spirits of the forest. Do not question us," he shouted, his voice booming. The villagers trembled and watched helplessly as the masquerades disappeared with their goods. That evening, the village was filled with fearful whispers. People were beginning to question whether the masquerade's mission or if they had come to punish the village. Emeka noticed the change and felt uneasy. Emeka's suspicion grew, and he decided to keep a close eye on his friends. He noticed that Namdi, Obina, and Chuka often disappeared during the day, returning with food they claimed was from generous villagers. Emeka grew worried that they might be using the masquerades to do things he would never approve of. One night, he decided to follow them without telling anyone. Late one night, Emeka quietly slipped into the shadows, watching Namdi, Obina, and Chuka as they prepared their masquerade costumes. He hid behind a tall bush and observed as they laughed softly among themselves, speaking of all the things they could take without anyone daring to stop them. Emeka's heart sank as he realized his friends had betrayed their promise. The three friends put on their masks and strange garments, then slunk into the village with Emeka following closely behind. He watched as they headed straight for Okeke's farm, where they'd already taken food before. They crept to the back of Okeke's hut, where he stored his fresh yams and cassava. Emeka clenched his fist, filled with anger and disbelief, as he saw them loading baskets with Okeke's hard-earned crops. When they finished, Namdi whispered, "Let's go to the market tomorrow. I heard Adebi just brought a big harvest from her farm. The villagers are so scared, they'll never know it's us." Obina laughed, "And if they try to stop us, we'll just chant in that strange language and make them run. They are all fools, afraid of shadows." Unable to listen any longer, Emeka stepped forward and spoke in a low but firm voice.
Namdi, Obina, Chuka, so, this is what you've been doing. You're using the masquerades to steal from our own people. I trusted you. We all made a promise that this was to heal and help the village. You are doing more damage to our people than the illness. You are so heartless.
Chuka tried to justify himself. But, Emeka, it's just a few yams here and there. The villagers won't miss it. And besides, they are too scared to do anything about it.
That's exactly why it's wrong. They trusted us too. We started this to help them, not to use their fear against them. Can't you see that we're becoming worse than the sickness itself?
Obina's face softened, and he looked away in shame. But Namdi, still defiant, crossed his arms. "Emeka, you're making too big a deal of this. We are just having a little fun, and the villagers don't even know it's us. We are not really hurting anyone." Emeka was silent for a moment, then he said, "If you won't stop, then I will put an end to this myself." He turned and began walking away, determined to find a way to protect the village from his own friends if necessary. But as he walked back to the village, Emeka's heart grew heavy. He knew that if he exposed his friends, it would hurt the people he had set out to protect. The villagers looked up to the masquerades now. They believed in the mystery and healing they brought. If the villagers discovered that some of the masquerades had betrayed them, it would destroy everything Emeka had worked so hard to build. The next night, Emeka went back to the village elders and proposed a new rule. "Respected elders," he said, bowing low, "I have noticed that the masquerades have become a powerful part of our village life. Perhaps it would be wise to only allow the masquerades to come on special nights when the entire village can gather to watch. This way, the mystery is preserved, and everyone can celebrate together." The elders thought this was a wise idea. They agreed to announce that from then on, the masquerades would appear only on chosen nights, when everyone could prepare and gather in the market square. Emeka's hope was that this new rule would limit his friends' chances to use the masquerade as a cover for stealing. When Nnamdi, Obinna, and Chuka heard of the new rule, they were annoyed but agreed to go along with it for a time. They didn't want the villagers to suspect anything. But even with the new rule, they began plotting in secret, planning how they could continue their thefts without being discovered. A few weeks later, during one of the special masquerade nights, the entire village gathered under the full moon to watch the masquerades perform. The villagers cheered as Emeka and his friends, along with some of the other young men, danced and chanted, dressed in their mysterious costumes. The village drums beat loudly, and the people clapped and sang along, celebrating their strength and unity. But even as the villagers cheered, Nnamdi, Obinna, and Chuka whispered among themselves, planning their next move. Nnamdi's voice was filled with excitement. "After tonight, we can take whatever we want. The villagers will just think it's another appearance of the spirits." Emeka, noticing them whispering, grew worried. He realized that as long as the masquerade remained a mystery, his friends might continue to abuse its power. He knew he had to come up with a new plan, one that would protect the village without exposing his friends' betrayal. That night, as the masquerades finished their dance and the villagers returned to their homes, Emeka stayed behind in the market square, deep in thought. Emeka stayed in the market square, pondering his next steps. He couldn't let Nnamdi, Obinna, and Chuka continue their wicked acts under the cover of the masquerade, but he didn't want the villagers to lose their sense of safety and unity either. He realized that the only way to end this was to catch them in the act. The next day, Emeka quietly gathered a few trustworthy villagers, including his uncle Okafor, a respected elder. He shared his suspicions, and they agreed to help him. Together, they set up a plan. They would spread a rumor that the villagers were leaving a large stockpile of yams and cassava in the market square that night as an offering to the masquerades. Nnamdi, Obinna, and Chuka heard the rumor and were thrilled. "Did you hear that, Chuka?" Nnamdi whispered excitedly. "They are leaving food just for us. This is going to be our biggest haul yet." That night, Emeka and the trustworthy villagers hid nearby, watching the market square in silence. Sure enough, as the village lay quiet, Nnamdi, Obinna, and Chuka appeared, dressed in their masquerade costumes. They looked around, making sure no one was watching, then began filling their sacks with the yams and cassava. At that moment, Emeka and the villagers leaped from their hiding spots, shouting, "Stop right there!" Nnamdi and Obinna froze, shocked to see Emeka and a crowd of villagers surrounding them. But Chuka, quick to react, dropped his sack and ran as fast as he could toward the forest. Nnamdi and Obinna tried to follow, but the villagers grabbed hold of them, pulling off their masks and exposing their faces. Gasps filled the square as the villagers recognized them. Adeebi, who had lost her yams, stared in disbelief. Okeke shook his head in sadness, his trust shattered. "So it was you all along," he said quietly. Emeka stepped forward, his face full of sorrow. "Why did you do it?" "We started the masquerade to heal and protect the village, not to steal from our own people." Obinna hung his head, ashamed, but Nnamdi remained defiant. "You might catch us, but we'll go somewhere else," he muttered. "People fear the masquerades everywhere. We don't need this village." The elders, saddened and disappointed, banished Nnamdi and Obinna from Umuofia. As they left, Nnamdi turned and glared at Emeka. "You'll regret this," he spat. "We'll find a new village that will believe in our power." Chuka had already escaped, disappearing into the darkness. Together, the three former friends traveled to distant villages, disguising themselves as masquerades, using fear to steal from unsuspecting people. They became known as rogue masquerades, bringing trouble wherever they went. Back in Umuofia, life slowly returned to normal. With the mystery of the masquerade solved, the villagers knew they could rely on each other to heal the village. Emeka and his friends continued the tradition of the masquerade, but this time openly, as a celebration of strength, unity, and resilience.
The story of the three rogue masquerades spread to other villages. Emeka and his trusted friends traveled far and wide to expose their criminal activities. Wherever Nnamdi, Obinna, and Chuka went, people stood their ground, unafraid of their costumes. They became irrelevant in time. Some years later they traveled to a distant lands where they resumed their wicked acts, spreading rumors that the masquerades are spirits. And so, Emeka's village flourished, its people forever remembering the true origin of the masquerade, not to deceive or steal, but to bring courage and hope to all. Good intentions, while often rooted in kindness or a desire for improvement, can sometimes be manipulated by individuals with hidden agendas. These people may exploit noble causes or well-meaning efforts to serve selfish, harmful, or even malicious purposes. This phenomenon is common in scenarios where trust and goodwill make it easier for manipulative individuals to act unchecked, transforming what was initially intended for good into something that causes harm or undermines the original purpose.
For more captivating stories from around the globe, perfect contemporary stories for all ages, each episode brings you timeless stories filled with life lessons, humor, and adventure. Subscribe to Sunshine Stories and African Folktales channel. Turn on the notification bell for new uploads. Let the sun brighten your day.